Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll wait on the chairman. We're going to go ahead and do the first readers to start off with this morning. This afternoon, I'm sorry. Lindsay, where'd you go? Okay, she's on. We'll start off with House Bill 192. Oh, thank goodness, there's the chairman. Mr. Millar, is he here? House Bill 192. You go ahead, sir.
The companion bill to this is House Bill 162, which is a constitutional amendment. And this bill has been signed on by Chairman Harbin and Stevens, Roberts, Houston, and Sheldon. And Speaker Pro Tem Burkholder likes the bill as well. They discussed it last year. And basically what this does, it takes our current $1/4 mil of state property tax, which is approximately $80 million, and designates it for trauma. And there's been some discussion on this. I've been to several seminars on trauma. How are we going to do it? What's the relation to property tax to trauma? The bottom line is we need some money. This is not a tax increase. It is not a fee. All this is a shift of the proceeds. And if we put it in a designated fund, and from what I understand, particularly outside the metro area, trauma is one of the biggest issues we face in this state. No future governor or no future legislature can tamper with that money. And under normal times, when house values start to increase again, the fund will grow accordingly, and we can finally fund trauma. And we passed this thing, I don't know when we established that commission, it must have been at least 5 years ago. And we can actually keep our promise to the people. And that's where it is as of right now. Any other questions, or Mr. Chair? And thank you for having me, as always.
The pleasure is all ours, believe me, Mr. Millar. Are there any questions, members of the committee, for the presenter? That was 192, correct?
Yeah, you had 162 is the constitutional amendment, H.R. 162, and the House bill is 192. That's correct. I just did them together.
I don't see any questions, so you must just absolutely dazzle this committee. So we really thank you for being here. We're going to assign that to our Public Finance and Policy Subcommittee, and we look forward to getting a hearing on this very, very important matter as expeditiously as possible. And I certainly commend the gentleman for bringing a really good idea to deal with the trauma crisis that we face in this state.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, sir. We'll see you soon. Representative Lindsay, the chair recognizes you, sir, for first reader on House Bill 233. Please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I've seen bills hijacked before, but this is the first time I've hijacked my own bill. House Bill 233 is in your folder, and basically will serve as a companion to H.R. 1. And if I may take a few minutes and sort of walk you through what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide for both the fill the concerns some people had regarding the enabling aspects of the legislation of the constitutional amendment, as well as take immediate action on behalf of the property owners of Georgia. If you will, find in your folder 7991S. And let me sort of walk you through it. Before I do so, let me first say very quickly, this is the culmination of a lot of discussions with Republicans and Democrats and different interest groups over the last few weeks. And I think we put together a bill that sort of attempts to address most of what I consider the various legitimate concerns that we've heard. Regarding Section 1, what Section 1 will allow, Mr. Chairman, is for an immediate 3% cap on all property, both residential and commercial, in the various county jurisdictions throughout the state of Georgia. It does, however, also allow for an opt-out if the particular governing authority that is going to be governed by this cap wishes to opt out. They may do so within 30 days of the signing of this bill by a 2/3 vote of the local governing authority. And that's very simply what Section 1 does. It basically goes ahead, and particularly during these difficult economic times, brings some stability to the lives of our property owners in this state and gives them some ability to start to try to budget for their future. In regards to Section 2, if I may walk you through that for a moment, beginning on page 2, 48-5B-2, A and B are essentially the same language as already contained in H.R. 1 regarding the 3% cap and how that will be handled over a 3-year basis. Section C deals with the concern that some folks have expressed regarding the inequities presently found in the system when you've got the local governing authorities who have, rather the local assessors who haven't been properly and uniformly assessing property. It requires them to take into account when they are assessing the fair market value the lower assessed values in the comparable values in the same geographical area. Section D, I think it's very important to simply sort of reiterate the fact that this isn't the end-all, cure-all for everything, particularly when it comes to homeowners. A lot of folks have expressed concerns about does this do enough for homeowners. I think it does something for all property owners. But what subsection D does is simply just reiterate what the law already is. And I think very clearly that this proposal in no way interferes with our ability in the General Assembly through local legislation and also through general legislation to adjust upward homestead exemptions, which of course go exclusively to the protection of homeowners. 48-5B3 is the same language that we put in H.R. 1 regarding dealing with errors both on the local level and on the state level. 48-5B4 takes on the issue that I think has been raised by some of the committee members. I know Representative Powell and others have. What do you do about transfers of interest, and how do you deal with that issue, particularly in light of the commercial property? It's often it's generally pretty easy when it comes to residential. It's a transfer of deeds. When it comes to commercial property, however, it's a lot more complex, and we have a series of actions that will trigger the transfer of property provisions contained in the constitutional amendment. Obviously, by deed, land contract, we go into how to deal with trust, where there is a change in the beneficiaries involved, what to do with wills, what to do with conveyances by lease, how to deal with closely held corporations where the ownership interest changes by more than 50%, what to do with publicly held companies, what to do with sort of what I call sort of forced transfer situations, such as when the house burns down or that sort of thing. Well, how to deal with life estates, how to deal with situations where you acquire property as a result of foreclosure, how you deal with the various when you also obtain property through a security situation, how all those are dealt with. We also have a penalty aspect that's found in Section 7 and 8 of the proposed section of that particular code section. In addition to that, one other issue, and I think Representative Abrams raised this one, dealing with what I think she phrased it. I like the phrase "howdy neighbor." 48-5B5 deals with just that issue of what to do with when property is transferred to a new owner. What we've tried to do, and I've taken a look at various issues around the state and talked to various experts, and generally speaking, property transfers in this state on average about once every 7 years. And what we've done is, rather than an immediate step up in a new assessed value upon the transfer, we have a phase-in period that lasts 7 years. And basically, over those 7-year period of time, either the cap contained in the bill or 1/7 of the new market value, whichever is greater, will be the new assessed value until you get to the new market value after 7 years as a result of the transfer of the property to a new interest. And we try to track it along with what is the average time period for transfers in property around the state. 48-5B6, once again, is the same as what we've had in the constitutional amendment, simply tracks the same language and places it in statute, dealing both with recognizing the existing homestead exemptions and also existing floating homesteads that have provided freezers in certain areas. We recognize specifically that these are recognized under Georgia law and will continue in effect, as well as recognizing those local constitutional provisions dealing with county millage caps that have been set by local constitutional provisions. I believe Houston County and Richmond County are two of those by example. 48.5B7 I think is important because there's a lot of confusion about schools and about school boards and their 20 mil cap, and I think this is a very important provision regarding this issue. As we've discussed before this committee, there is in the Constitution for many school districts a 20 mil cap that's recognized. But however, the Constitution also specifically recognizes that 20 mil cap can be raised or modified by the school board in conjunction with the referendum. What 48.5B7 does is basically set out the procedure pursuant to Georgia Constitution regarding how this may be done. We set out basically that the school board may do so directly, doesn't require local legislation. They can do so directly, and they can do so in an expedited format. They can do so in not less than 45 days. And I think that would help them if they were trying to project a future budget and they knew they needed to raise the mill cap. This sort of lays out how they can do so in an expedited fashion. In addition to that, it also lays out the question that will have to be posed to the citizens in that particular referendum. 48.5B8 similarly also deals with, we have a few municipalities who also have a mill cap. I've talked to some of the various representatives from those areas, and we think we have a similarly good provision here dealing with those local communities. Once again, it does allow, notwithstanding other previous laws, it does allow for those city councils to call for a referendum directly, and once again has generally the same provisions as when it comes to school boards. So we felt like we've dealt with that. Section 3, Mr. Chairman, deals with the effective date. Like I said, Section 1 would go into effect immediately upon signature of the governor, and Section 2 would go into effect, of course, upon the ratification of H.R. 1. Also, I want to make a point. Section 1 would also would cease to be applicable once that constitutional amendment is approved, or January 1, 2011. That's basically it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. We have some questions, but I'm going to ask the questioners
Sure.
If their question is something you can answer in about less than 30 seconds. If not, would you please hold your questions for the subcommittee hearing, which will let you sit there for the next 500 hours and ask questions if you want to.
Okay.
But for the purpose of this, we've got a lot of other business, and so if you can keep your questions to a minimum today, but every member of this committee is invited to the subcommittee once we get this bill assigned.
Thank you, Mr.
Number 8, is that Chairman Mills?
I can wait till the subcommittee.
You waive at this point then? Okay, thank you. We'll be glad to have you there and accommodate you. 23, who is that? Okay. I didn't mean to scare you both off completely. It might have been just a simple yes or no question. My apologies. I don't mean to limit the debate. Okay, we will assign this, Mr. Lindsay, to the ad valorem tax subcommittee meeting. The chairs of that, you well know from the last time you deliberated.
I spent a lot of time with Mr. Chairman.
Very similar legislation are Chairman Roberts, Graves, or David Knight, and I'm sure there'll be a hearing pretty quickly for
Mr. Chairman, let me just very quickly reiterate what I've tried to maintain an open door. I've had probably 20 or 30 different legislators on both sides of the party aisles to come to me, and please feel free to continue to do so if you've got any questions or if you feel like anything else needs to be added that we have forgotten. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
They very well need a bodyguard. Thank you. Okay, moving along, House Bill 25. Representative Martin Scott, and where are you here? You want to present from your place? You're recognized for that purpose, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. House Bill 25 is a bill that we've introduced in the past, and actually in previous years we've enacted an increase in the threshold of the sales tax deposit that's required by dealers who collect sales tax on behalf of the state. And I have once again introduced this bill to eliminate the deposit that is required by retailers who collect sales tax on behalf of the state.
Thank you, sir. I don't see any questions. Thank you for that explanation. We're going to be assigning that to our sales tax subcommittee, which you chair along with Chairman Parsons and David Knight. So I suspect one of those three will have a hearing pretty soon for you. Chairman Ron Stevens with us. House Bill 39, please, sir, if you would present from your place.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The House Bill 39 is the 100% voluntary user fee on cigarettes. It has a 100% exemption of tax for those who do not smoke.
Yeah. That was certainly an interesting first reading. One of our most. We've got a question for you from Tobacco Country.
I'm afraid to ask.
No, really, it's simple. Mr. Chairman, in light of what the federal government has just passed down, where they've increased the tobacco tax, how do you see it affecting?
This is going to, of course, for the committee, open up some debate on where we are with the rest of our states, but there definitely is at least at the floor 38 cents, and quite honestly, we can still shoot for more to keep us competitive on the same playing field with the rest of our states.
Thank you, Chairman Stevens. We will assign that to our Public Finance and Policy Subcommittee for deliberation. And who do we have on that? Chairman Chuck Martin, Chairman Tom Rice, or David Knight. Either of those three gentlemen can give you a hearing. Thank you. Representative Kathy Ash, you recognize, tell us about House Bill 175, please, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's a real joy to be back in front of Ways and Means. Great committee. And as I was thinking about coming, I found a new book called Neo Vouchers. And in it, there's a whole section about tax law really being key policy decisions. They directly reflect governmental priorities, providing incentives and disincentives for taxpayer behavior. Last year, by 2 votes, we passed House Bill 1133, which provides for tuition tax credits for anyone, non-means tested, to go to any one of the school scholarship organizations. This year, we're confronted with an incredible fiscal crisis. I am particularly concerned about the funding of school nurses. And one night I thought, wait a minute. Last year we provided up to $50 million in income tax credits for folks who give money to these particular scholarship organizations, not allowing people to get those tax credits to give to public schools, just to private schools. Not means tested, anybody of any income can take advantage. So I have become somewhat knowledgeable about the 6 programs in the 6 states that have these. And I've come to the conclusion that as we study House Bill 100, that it's also important to look at the possibility of repealing what we did last year with the income tax credits. This may be a year that we talk about vouchers, and this is a piece of the voucher movement that I think we need to consider carefully. And so I bring you House Bill 175.
Thank you, Representative Ash. I have one question. You said House Bill 100. Is that attached legislation,
House
or is
Bill
that the prior bill?
100 is a modification to what we put into code last year. It makes it easier for an individual to give up to 75% of their income tax liability. An individual, 75% of their individual tax liability to one of these scholarship organizations. It makes it possible to point out which school you want that money to go. And it also makes it possible for the DOE not to have any form of accountability over what happens when a student takes a scholarship, other than the information they get from all private schools.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions. Thank you for that presentation. We shall assign House Bill 175 to our Income Tax Subcommittee.
Thank you
And
very much.
That's chaired by Chairman Mills, Alan Peake, or David Knight. Either of those three gentlemen can get you a hearing as soon as it's convenient.
Thank you very
for
much.
Thank you, Ms. Ash. Mr. Representative Austin. Okay, if you want to present from your place, tell us about House Bill 181, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 181 is a bill that deals with local sales tax, unclaimed local sales taxes that are being housed at the state, but yet we can't redistribute them to the local governments from whence they came. And this bill simply is going to give the ability for us to take what amounts to right now, Mr. Chairman, is an $18 million pool of unclaimed local sales tax and be able to remit those back to local governments on a pro rata or per capita basis. I'm honored to say that we were able to do this for the last 10 years, and this bill was originally carried by former Chairman Richard Royal, and it had a sunset date on there, and this just takes the sunset date back off there, and it gives us the ability to redistribute these local sales taxes the way that we've done very efficiently in the last 10 years.
Thank you, sir. That's it's a pretty substantial pool of money. I hope you get this done pretty quickly, because I imagine there are a lot of local government organizations that would like to see some certainty and reliability there. So
they're hurting like we are.
I don't see any other questions for you at this time. We're going to assign that to our sales tax subcommittee, and that would be Chairman Martin Scott, Chairman Don Parsons, or David Knight. Either of those three gentlemen can arrange a hearing for you, and I'd suggest as expeditiously as possible. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Austin. Representative Harry Geisinger, are you with us, Harry?
Right here.
What an honor. I've got two bills, and I'll let you choose which you want. Let us know if you're going to present House Bill 183 or House Resolution 139, or maybe they're connected.
They are companions,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
You're
Thank
recognized for that purpose, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have the companion pieces of legislation. One is a constitutional amendment, and the other one is the enacting legislation. As all of you know, everybody that's serving in this body wants to do something for trauma. One of the problems that we have is that most of the legislation that you will hear or have come before you won't raise enough money to do the job adequately, because the way it's designed, and you keep getting told that, oh, well, $80 million will do it. $80 million will only take care of those hospitals that are in existence today. You won't get additional hospitals south of the fall line. And that's what we've got to do to build this whole system. So my legislation simply does this. It is the Georgia Trauma Hospital Support Act of 2009. Section 2 refers to the code section. Part 5 on line 21, you'll see disposable wireless subscribers. Now, the reason I want to point this out is initially when we began to talk about having phones like we do for 911, which is $1.50, by the way, when you look at your phone bill. When we realized that telephones were the ways that we wanted to raise the money, I finally realized that there is a whole group of people out there, and they're the people that generally don't have credit, and when they go to the hospital, we're the ones that pay their bill. because they don't have insurance either. So I felt that it was only fair that that group have a little bit of skin in this game. So we have included the disposable telephones. The page 2 basically is all definitions. Line 74 is billing. Line 101 is the exemptions on page 4. Lines 112 through 118 are the retail sales and of the disposable disposable phones and the prepaid minutes. Now, I have discussed this with the Department of Revenue, and they say yes, it's collectible, it's doable, and they can work with it. Line 128 is the administrative cost. Everybody involved in this, whether it's AT&T or whoever, will receive 3% for handling these funds and then sending them on to the state. On line 168, we talk about the fact that we're going to put 15% of the funds raised aside for new trauma facilities and equipment for existing centers. Line 179 talks about the public and private hospitals and how they will report their services and who they've provided to the uninsured, how much they've provided. So there is always an accounting taking place. Mr. Chairman, I know you're in a hurry, so I'm going to be as brief as possible. We've created an oversight committee of the House and the Senate, 5 members each, and they will report back to the chambers annually. If there are no questions, Mr. Chairman, I ask that it be assigned.
Thank you, Representative Gossing. I don't see any questions at this time. I'm sure there will be in subcommittee. We're going to assign both of these matters to our Public Finance and Policy Subcommittee. If you want to make a note, that would be Chairman Chuck Martin, Chairman Tom Rice, or David Knight. Either of those 3 gentlemen can arrange a hearing for you at your earliest convenience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We thank you for that presentation. Moving along, House Bill 186, Chairman Chuck Martin. You want to present from your place, please, sir? Tell us about House Bill 186.
House Bill 186, Mr. Chairman, is a continuation of a measure passed by this House some years ago and actually passed by this committee in the House last year to extend the teleworking tax credit in Georgia. If the committee will recall, we passed this and it got over to the Senate and became a vehicle that the Senate chose to attach the income tax cut and got caught in a little politics last session. But what we intend to do is to extend, with the passage of this measure, the tax credits for telecommuting in the years 2010 and 2011. Briefly, Mr. Chairman, the program recently awarded over $1.5 million in tax credits to companies that had applied for it in its first year. They applied for $2.5 million. They were prorated. Each person was given 80%, so $2 million were granted. And when the actual application was done, just a little over $1.5 million. This is family friendly, environmentally friendly, and friendly to those that drive the roads in congested areas. Mr. Chairman, I ask that it be assigned to a subcommittee.
We thank you for that presentation, Chairman Martin. We're going to assign that to our Income Tax Subcommittee. That'd be Chairman Mills, Peak, or Knight, either of those 3. Hard to convince gentlemen will be the chair. Chairman Austin Scott, House Bill 188, if you'd like to present from your place. What number are you there? You're on, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. This is simply a bill that would change the sales tax collection on tobacco products to the wholesale level the same way we did with gasoline.
Okay, any questions? I don't see any. We're going to assign that to our sales tax subcommittee. That would be Chairman Scott, Parsons, or Knight. Let me ask, too, at this point, we've got probably 12 or so more first readers. Is there anyone here for a first reader that has an urgent need to be somewhere else? That I've got just a very random order, and I would like to. Do you have a first reader?
I'm standing in for Representative Day.
Okay. All right. Well, we would be honored to recognize you, the Minority Whip. House Bill 222, please, ma'am. Representative Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I am standing in for Representative Day. This is a very simple proposition. You've had some heavy lifting this afternoon. But what this does is for unremarried surviving spouses or minor children of disabled veterans, we would like for them to be allowed to keep that homestead exemption if they move to a new residence. As you know, when a spouse dies, the surviving spouse standard of living changes, and sometimes they can no longer afford to stay in the house that they had when they were when their spouse was alive. And so one of my constituents found herself in this situation. She had to get a new home, but she lost the exemption. And we're just asking that as long as their status remains the same, unremarried surviving spouse of a disabled veteran, they can keep that homestead exemption on a subsequent home. And that's it.
That certainly sounds like a plausible proposition to me. Are there any questions for Minority Whip on that matter? Thank you for that presentation, and we will assign that to our ad valorem tax subcommittee. And when you or Chairman Day are going to come back to deliberate that at subcommittee, that would be Chairman Jay Roberts, Tom Graves, or David Knight. Either of those three men can give you a hearing. Thank you very much. I'll ask again, is there anybody else that has an urgency? Okay. He raised his hand first, Chairman Smith, and since you have three, if it's all right with you, Chair recognizes Representative Dukes for House Resolution 7, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. I come before you this evening with a very, very simple resolution. It is a resolution that provides for the homeowners property tax grant relief to become a constitutional amendment. And basically it is a question that will be placed on the ballot for the voters, asking them, shall the Constitution of the state of Georgia be amended so to provide that the General Assembly shall have the authority to appropriate the funds each year to fund the property owner's tax relief grant at $8,000 of the assessed value up to $18,000 of the homeowners' assessed value. As you know, homeowners in this state they're under real stress based on the fact that we are 6th or 7th in the nation as far as losing jobs, and I think we're 8th as far as foreclosures. So they're in a position where that they are in desperate need for some form of relief. Also, part of it, as you know, 1/4 of the tax assessment that was used to that was provided by the state was to be used for the property owners tax relief grant program. When we passed that legislation, part of the relief would be funded by the homeowners themselves, such that the state put themselves in the reassessment business, and all of the counties and municipalities had to go through the assessment value, reassessing property every 3 years, so that we could get our 1/4 of assessed value. that money that we receive from homeowners was to be given back to homeowners along with just a little bit more. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Representative Dukes. I don't see any questions for you today. We will assign that to our ad valorem tax subcommittee. I'm sorry, we do have one question.
You said if we did this, we could fund it, but the way it's worded, it takes the can away and says shall. So what your bill does takes the discretion away. Where you said where you said can, I think you meant to say must, didn't you?
I think it says shall, but Governor,
That's
I
right,
stand
but your
corrected.
I'm always happy to correct.
Okay, again, that's the ad valorem tax subcommittee. Chairman Roberts, Tom Graves, or David Knight.
Thank you, Mr.
Representative
Chairman.
Dukes. Now, long awaited. How excited this whole committee is to hear from such a distinguished man. Representative Bob Smith, tell us about House Bill 240, please, sir.
240, Mr. Chairman, is a real simple proposition. When you receive your tax bill, you have a dollar amount at the bottom of the tax bill where you're actually looking at the last painful moment before you write that check. Well, above that, what this bill says is we're going to show the last 4 years of taxes on this property, regardless of who owns it, and below each of those there'll be a percentage increase in taxes or decrease. So that's all the bill does. Where you see that painful moment of the dollar amount that you're going to have to write a check for that property tax bill, just above it, immediately above it, will be a block of previous taxes and increases thereof.
Thank you, Representative Smith. I don't see any questions about what hereafter will be known as the Smith Painful Moment Bill. And we're going to assign that to our painful ad valorem tax subcommittee. Now, would you tell us about House Bill 241, please, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Again, this bill was perfected 2 years ago with then Chairman Richard Royal's subcommittee. And what this did was, is in one particular school district, they had public hearings and went to the taxing authority, which was the county commissioners, and with a millage rate increase. And after the vote was handled and approved, it goes to the revenue department. Said, oh, by the way, we want to raise our millage rate again without public hearings. And the tax commissioner, the revenue commissioner has that right to do that, discretionary. I want to close that loophole. And another thing is when we have these this is relating to the backdoor tax increase. When we have these backdoor tax increases, we're supposed to have 3 public hearings. Well, I don't ever see any notification about this in electronic or in the paper. Many people don't read the paper anymore, so I'm suggesting we do that in other means to notify people when these meetings are on a tax increase. And particularly if it's in the paper, then the words, I think it's in the language, says this is a tax increase legislation. And in that body it says what a $100,000 piece of property is going up in value tax-wise. And that's simply what it is. We perfected it 2 years ago, as I said, Mr. Chairman. I ask for your favorable placement in the right subcommittee.
Yeah, I'm probably going to miss it on this one, but I'm going to put it in the ad valorem tax subcommittee, even if that's not right, because I think what I heard you say is it has to do with ad valorem tax, but I'm not sure through which door or however you explained it. Now, assuming you've saved the best for last, would you tell us about House Bill 250, please?
Mr. Chairman, you asked if it had anybody that was urgent, something urgent, and needed to go before this committee. House Bill 250 is urgent. It's urgent. The taxpayers are sick and tired of being sick and tired about unfair taxes. And what this does, sir, first time since 1877, it creates a constitutional convention. Now, there are 56 senatorial districts in Georgia. one person can be elected from each of those senatorial districts. You could do it as a representative, or the regular Joe or Susie on the street can run for this to serve on this convention. The governor, once the Senate and the House approves this, the governor has to call for the election of the delegates. The election of the delegates. The delegates are seated. I've got the year 2012 to come up with a new constitution. I'd like to bring that back to not this November, but the following November, to look at what this will do is look at all taxes. And I know what you in this Ways and Means Committee do every time. It's about taxes. Everything's about taxes. You're inundated with different ways of exempting taxes. You're inundated with different ways of having taxes. There are over 130 types of taxes in Georgia. There are dozens of exemptions. There are dozens of loopholes. And when you talk to cities and counties and school boards and private citizens that are always sitting in the back of the room instead of the front row, and that's the taxpayers, they'll say the system is broken. And what this will do, it'll put your work even harder, because the Ways and Means Committee will have to look at the new Constitution. But the Constitution will be voted up and down by the people of Georgia as a whole after the convention has convened, met, and come up with a new Constitution as it relates to taxes at the state level and local level. And that, in a nutshell, sir, is the legislation. And I hope that you'll assign that to a favorable subcommittee.
Well, you'll have to give me a second. I'm all teared up after that speech. So I can get over the tingle in my leg. I was going to ask if there was any subcommittee chairs here that would volunteer, but I'm afraid that might tell a little bit too much about you. So I'm gonna put that gem of a piece of legislation into our tax reform, since that is tax reform probably at its purest state.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your attention.
Let me tell you who that is, if you want to write down. That would be Chairman Ron Stevens, Chairman Jeff May, or David Knight. Either of those three gentlemen could get you a hearing on that piece of legislation.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you. My apologies to Representative Thomas. I don't have good eyesight, and I may have looked over you there in the room, and I don't mean that in any disrespectful way at all. Would you please, sir, tell us about House Bill 247? You're recognized for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Apologize up front. No tears, tingles, or even books to read from. Just have a serious piece of legislation to try and get into subcommittee. Currently, the state provides for an ad valorem homestead tax exemption to disabled veterans. Now, that is restricted to veterans who have a 100% disability. What this bill proposes to do is to change the law to allow for any disabled veteran to qualify for a homestead exemption based on the percentage of disability that is determined by the Veterans Administration, U.S. Veterans Administration. And that's, in a nutshell, the purpose of the bill.
Are there any questions from any members of the committee on this legislation? I don't see any today. I'm sure there will be in subcommittee. Representative Thomas, we're going to assign that to our ad valorem tax subcommittee, and that would be Chairman Roberts, Graves, or Knight. Either of those gentlemen could arrange a hearing for you. Thank you for your presentation and for this legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair is going to exercise my discretion. I'm going to assign House Bill 212 to the Sales Tax Subcommittee. It has to do with the jet fuel exemption. And now, I guess we didn't have you paired together. I'm sorry, Chairman Martin. Tell us about House Bill 255, please, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I know we're getting late in the day. House Bill 255 seeks conversation over giving a tax credit to those that use transit in this day when traffic is tough and transportation projects are hard to fund, we seek to encourage people's use of transit. So we introduced House Bill 255 to have that conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll assign that to our income tax subcommittee. Chairman Mills, Peak, or Knight can handle that for you. Is Representative Holt in the room? Have I overlooked somebody? Is Representative Holt here with us? No? Okay. How about our vice chair? Chair recognizes Vice Chairman of this committee to tell us, please, Representative Sims, about House Bill 204 from your place. What number are you there, please? You're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, House Bill 204 is a sales tax exemption for diesel fuel for locomotives, and similar to the sales tax exemption for the motor fuel for tractors and those kind of things. Same type of exemption.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we'll assign that to the sales tax subcommittee. That concludes, ladies and gentlemen, our first readers for today, unless I've overlooked any. Is there anyone here for the purpose of first reading legislation into this committee? I don't see any, so that will close first readers for today. And now we'll move on to consideration of two pieces of legislation by the full committee. It has, is there a chair of the sales tax committee to report to the full committee? Excuse me, is there a chair of the public finance and policy subcommittee here to report the results of that subcommittee hearing on House Bill 121? Chairman Martin.
Mr. Chairman, your Public Finance and Policy Subcommittee met on this matter, House Bill 221, on the 29th with a due pass recommendation to full committee. It was presented by the governor's floor leader, Representative Cole.
Chair recognizes the governor's floor leader, Representative Jim Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring before you House Bill 121. House Bill 121 seeks to ratify the governor's suspension of the otherwise required July 2008 increase in the state prepaid motor sales tax. And I know members of the committee are well versed in this, but let me explain. We recalculate that twice a year with the effect going in January 1st and July 1st. When the time for calculation came around back in the spring, around May, we were looking at record high gas prices that all of us know we were having to pay at the pumps. The governor decided at that time to freeze the rate at the January 1st level, which resulted in approximately $60 million tax savings for the citizens of Georgia. So this is an attempt to ratify that executive order once we came back in session. And I would be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
I don't see any questions. What's the pleasure of the committee? I have a motion, I think, by Representative Martin Scott, do pass. I have a second by Chairman Roberts. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion do pass, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, last but certainly not least, the only man standing between us and adjournment is to my right. Is there a chair of sales tax here to report the results of House Bill 46? Chairman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your sales tax committee met last week and gave a favorable due pass recommendation on HB 46.
Chair recognizes the Majority Caucus Chair. Representative J. Roberts, tell us about House Bill 46, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 46 basically is just a housekeeping bill. House Bill 46 ratifies the governor's executive order that he signed, suspending the state sales tax portion of dyed fuel for agriculture, timber purposes, and so forth. As many of you know that were here last year, we actually Representative Johnny Floyd come around and asked for us to sign a resolution urging the governor to do this, and as a result of the resolution that we passed, the governor signed an executive order that would suspend this for a period of basically 1 year. The fiscal note basically says that there was a hit of around $636,000 to the state. So basically with this, we're just ratifying what the governor's already signed. Any questions? Be glad to try to answer.
I think that's up to me to say if there's any questions.
I said I'd be glad to try to answer.
Thank you for that stimulating presentation. I actually do have one, and it's a very serious question. Are you aware, and this is intended to be a friendly question, and I favor this legislation. Don't mistake the question for anything other than that. Are you aware of inspection processes that deal with those that might seek to abuse the consumption and use of dyed fuels? Maybe there obviously is a great need for agriculture to have off-road fuel affordable to our folks, because their prices are set by other people. We understand that about agriculture in this General Assembly. So they have to have the most favorable conditions for even a chance to make a profit. But are you aware of any, I guess, oversight or inspection methodology that's in place to eliminate those that might take advantage or defraud what we're trying to do here for our agricultural community, like over-the-road truck drivers and others that might try to use this fuel?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, there has been a few stings that have taken place down in my home county of Irwin County, as well as Representative Sims down in Coffee County as well, where they actually come down and they will pull them over, and they can actually take and check the exhaust coming out of the vehicle, and they at that point can determine whether they are running dyed fuel or not in that vehicle. If they are, then they are fined the first time around $1,000 to $5,000, and if they are caught on a subsequent offense, most of the time it runs upwards of $50,000.
Well, thank you for that explanation. I don't see any other questions. What's the pleasure of the committee? We have a due pass motion by Representative Will Towton and a second by Representative Black. Is there any further discussion? 25, is that somebody? Your mic's on.
I was just going to add what Roberts had to say about the oversight on this dyed fuel. They have been stings where they would come in to farmer meetings and go out in the parking lot and pull samples out of the fuel tank of the pickups, in case some of these farmers, a lot of them have diesel pickups, and it's illegal to use that dyed fuel in the pickup. It goes into the tractor. So they have been very aggressive in monitoring this.
I'm certainly glad to find that out. Any further discussion? We have a motion due pass. We have a second. All in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Carries unanimously. We shall be reporting this legislation to the Rules Committee for further action on the House floor. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're adjourned.